Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I know it's been a while since I've been on, and particularly just been me. So I'm happy to be back. Hope you've missed me. I've missed you guys. So today I have a really exciting topic for you, one that um, I am gonna own up front. I have done. Um, yes, the pun on we've all done it. Yes, I've done this more times than I care to admit. And the interesting thing is, I've heard many of my other friends, peers, girlfriends admitting this, but not necessarily in a work context. So, what is it? What is it? Have you ever practiced a conversation in your head right before you actually needed to talk to somebody? Particularly if it's going to be a difficult or challenging discussion, maybe one you are anticipating a fight about, resistance, some kind of disagreement. And as you are practicing this conversation, you just know what the other person is going to say, right? So you anticipate what they're going to say, and then the next thing you know, you create a zinger back because you want to be prepared for whatever they say to you, so you have the perfect comeback. Have you ever done that? I mean, I know I have. Um, it's under the guise of I want to be prepared for whatever comes at me in a difficult discussion. But as this imaginary conversation continues, Um, are you prepared? Like, are you noticing that as those zingers are coming right off your lips, do you feel your blood pressure rising? Like, do you find that you are getting incredibly amped at this imaginary discussion in your head? That the minute you start getting that emotional rush starts to feel incredibly real, right? So, yeah. And so you have this imaginary discussion in your mind in anticipation of the real conversation. And then you're fully like guns locked and loaded, ready to go, armored up because you are prepared for whatever negative thing that comes at you. Cool. Then what actually happens when you go into this very real conversation in this armored up, amped up, hyped up emotional state? Well, let's break that down a little bit. And again, as I said in the beginning, like I have talked about this, particularly like if you have a team member that you're very nervous about, or if you have a discussion you need to have with your boss, how often do you practice what you want to say before you actually say it? My friends have said they do this. A lot of my female friends have admitted they do this in anticipation of difficult discussions with their husband. Um, and the consensus genuinely is when you are ready for this battle in your head, and then you walk right into a conversation with the person you have been having this imaginary discussion with, that they are almost hit with this wall of fieriness and they have no idea where it's come from, right? It's all they know is that this person sitting across from them is clearly pissed or clearly frustrated or clearly annoyed and like guns ablazing, and they still aren't even sure potentially about what the topic is. They just know that you are in an agitated state. And they're sitting there feeling like they've walked into an argument with midway through and I'm really not sure what they missed. And the worst part is the more clueless they appear, the more angry you become because you know exactly what we're talking about because you've been having this conversation in your head for God knows how long in anticipation of the real thing. So, sound familiar to anybody? Whether it's your personal life or your professional life. Have you ever just practiced the conversation and wound yourself up and then walked into it in a sense that you created a very, shall we say, chaotic, potentially toxic dynamic from the get-go, because the person on the other side of you may not know what you're talking about, has no idea why you're so angry. And your anger, your obvious heightened emotional state immediately puts them in a defensive position, which may only further what you think was going to happen in the first place for all those zingers you created. So you have unintentionally created a very unhealthy atmosphere for a very necessary conversation. Right. And so this is one of those moments where I talk about where we bring the fun to dysfunction, and we're not necessarily doing it to be malicious. Oftentimes when I've asked people if they do this and they admit that they do it, it is that idea of, because the conversation is important, I want to prepare. I want to practice what I want to say. That's awesome. Like, we're going to get into how to do this and do this well. That is huge. But what you don't want to do is get into a spiral of only anticipating the negative that may come out of the conversation, so that you have those quote unquote zingers ready. So what I want us to get back to is, I do think it is incredibly important, when you have a difficult conversation, to really think through a couple of basic things, especially if you're very nervous about the discussion or you're uncomfortable about the discussion. If you're married to somebody, they probably already know you really well. In the workplace, when we're talking about other leaders, we're talking about team members, you're not going to be granted the same level of grace and forgiveness. Let's be very honest. So it is always a good idea to prepare. I want that to be hardcore, hardwired. If you have a conversation, particularly if it's with an existing challenging dynamic, you and this person have already kind of rubbed each other the wrong way, or your personalities just kind of don't click, you need to practice. So the things that I want you to really focus on when you are preparing and practicing is, what is it that you really want to say? Why does it need to be said? And what outcome do you intend from this conversation? Are you very clear on those three things? Again, want to make sure we're clear. What do you want to say? Why is that so important? And what is the expected outcome? What do you want the intended outcome to be? So that when you actually practice the words coming out of your mouth, those three things should be your guiding light as to what actually needs to be said. If the conversation starts to get derailed, how do you bring it back to those core elements, right? It is just crucial that you understand why you're having this conversation in the first place in order to have a productive discussion. You have to get these things very, very clear. And also, if you have these things very clear in your mind, when the well, I should say, if the conversation should become one that becomes defensive, becomes personal, these are touch points for you to kind of bring you back, rein you in from the over emotional state that we can wind ourselves up in. Like I said, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I have had conversations where the person on the other side of me was hoping, prodding, picking, because that gave them justification for something else. If I lost my cool, if I lost my temper, then that gave justification for them to show up as less than their best self. So as a leader, as somebody that wants to be respected and wants to show up as my best self every day, part of that is, how do you manage the emotional state when things get hairy? And again, it's about having those basics. So what you don't want to do is have this turn into some kind of Bravo-esque episode with tables being flipped and people throwing things at each other, right? So again, pulling that back, if you can manage your emotion, keep very clear about the purpose of the conversation, um, you're going to end up in a much better place and you're going to feel way more in control. So I said earlier that practice is important. I believe that. I believe you should use practice to help you anticipate what is to come, but not necessarily rev that emotional engine to the point that you sabotage the conversation before it even has started, right? So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to leave you with um, two very clear suggestions. So if you find that you do this, where you have these conversations and you find yourself spiraling in the imaginary Thunderdome, here's what I want you to do. First, if you find that you have amped yourself up right before a crucial conversation, so you've done this, like you're doing it by yourself, you're just sitting here thinking it through, the first thing I want you to do is check your emotional state before you walk into that conversation. If you know you are not your calmest self, right? And we all know when that happens. I want you to take a few moments to calm down. Plain and simple. I want you to take, a couple of very slow, deep breaths, close your eyes, maybe go for a walk for a second. Just do something to try to slow down that nervous system you got going on. Get your head out of the spiraling conversation that you just had with yourself so that you can show up as your calmest self. Because you did some prep, right? But maybe that prep got you a little too excited. Because what's going to happen is it won't serve you or the other person if you are going in there hot-headed and not mentally prepared to have the discussion in the first place to get the best outcome for both parties involved, right? You don't want to get that label of crazy, dysfunctional, toxic, because you prepared in a way that set you up to not be successful. Now, if you're sitting here saying, Kim, you're saying practice, but you've just basically said every way that all this practice could lead me in a bad place. Yes, there is a way to practice. And this is what I would encourage you to do instead of doing it by yourself, is do it with a partner. Now, before you laugh at me, I do this with my clients, and every single one of them always kind of looks very insecure, uncomfortable, whatever. But here's what happens when you actually have to play out this conversation with another person is you have to, that emotion just doesn't sit in you and simmer. It actually comes out. And so it's not just in your head. So I would just say, allow this person, I'm gonna have to edit that out. Okay. So where I want you to start is I want you to pick someone that you feel safe with. So for instance, my clients do it with me. I'm their coach. I'm helping them grow in leadership. I'm helping them grow professionally. So I am a safe space for them. You might have a mentor that could be a good person for you to do that with. You might have a friend that you can lean on. But what I would encourage you to do is make sure you do this practice with someone that you feel comfortable allowing them to challenge you back. So for instance, I always say, how are you going to start the conversation? What's your first line? Give it to me. Give me the best line you got. What is your first line? And I will tell you that is usually the space we practice the most, because what they thought sounded good in their head didn't come out the way that they anticipated. And so we workshop it a little bit. Like, here's what I heard you say. Is that what you intended to say? Nope. Okay. So let's try that again. How could you say it differently? And we get to a point where they are actually very comfortable knowing how they want to start it. If I push back and give resistance, like what realistically would they say? Not what their imaginary self would say that sounds really good in their mind, but man, doesn't sound the same way coming out of their mouth. And then also, if it doesn't go well, how do you want to conclude that conversation so the relationship isn't damaged? And how do you want to go forward? Because not all conversations are going to end in agreement. So we basically practice a lot of different areas, but we are able to then assess, like, emotionally, where are you? What pushed your buttons, so that you can really prepare so that the buttons don't get pushed again when it's really, really critical. Right? So practice difficult conversations, but do it with a safe partner, someone that can really challenge you, someone who can say, here's what I heard you say. Is that what you meant? No, let's try that again. And do this and do it with enough time that, like, you can sit and, like, you can process it a little bit. Trust me, this makes a world of difference. How do I know? Because my clients have told me that it has changed how they've thought about their more challenging conversations. And yes, you're going to feel really goofy. You're going to feel really weird, almost like you're acting or something. But the truth of it is, the more you get into it, the more comfortable you are going to get at thinking it through in a healthy way, preparing in a healthy way. Um, so I really want to hear from you. Let me know, have you done it the unhealthy way? And then also let me know, if you try this, does it work for you? Has it helped you in managing the challenge and the emotion that comes up for people? Um, but yeah, so I just want to, before I let you guys go, I know we're quickly getting into summer, so I hope you guys keep listening, catch up on old episodes. We definitely have some more stuff coming before we take summer break in July. And I just want to remind you, if you have not signed up for my newsletter, please do. I send out a weekly newsletter with a lot of tips and tricks just like this, things to get you thinking about how you're showing up, and maybe if you want to do something a little different, and how that may make your life a little bit better. So if you are interested in that, I do have links in the bio, but you can also just go to kimberlyjbenoit.com/newsletter and sign up there. And I would love to see you in my inbox. All right, everybody. Thank you. Thank you. I can't wait to see you again soon. Make sure to drop me a line. Don't forget to subscribe, follow, and please rate the podcast. If you guys have been around a while, you know exactly how important that is. And it would mean a great deal to me to have that from you. So, anyway, until next time.